All right, so this is part two in this series, the origins of Islam, and so this is going to be a little bit more technical. Last time I was just kind of talking off the cuff. This time, um, what I'm going to do is show you or to speak with you about the different origins. And at one point, I may put this in a presentation format, but at the moment, it's just going to be a conversation. I'm going to be reading off my slides and discussing with you what I found, right? So just bear with me. The origins of Islam is steeped in several issues related to early Christianity, right? So there was a huge complexity in relationship to how early Christianity was formed, how Christianity today was formed from early Christianity, and in particular, at one point we're going to look at this person named Nestorius and the Nestorian Church and Creed, because this has a part to play in the origins of Islam. We're also going to look at what's known as the pseudepigrapha. These are books that were not included in the biblical canon, but that were still books, right? In particular, we're going to look at several books in this whole series. One of them is going to be called The Life of John the Baptist by Serapion, The Chronicles of Jeremiah, which is kind of like a pseudo-philo work, which was compiled within the first century AD, so right around the time that all of this was taking place. Then we're going to look at the Protevangelium of James in its relationship to the Quran. We're going to look at the Syrian infancy gospel, the infancy gospel of Thomas, and then we're going to look at the Book of Jubilees at some point. And then we're going to talk about an early sect of Christianity called the Ebionites. But these are things that are going to be discussed throughout the series. This particular discussion is not going to relate to that, right? So the first thing that I noticed was that the surahs of the Quran are haphazard per se, right? They're not like the Bible, where for the most part each chapter focuses on a single topic or story. That's not the way it is in the Quran. In the Quran, each surah is laid out in a pattern, like a particular structure. Now, I believe it's structured to indoctrinate the person, right? So when we look at the structure, the surah that we're going to be talking about tonight, let's analyze it, right? We're going to be talking about Surah 6, right? Surah 6 has 165 verses. So when we got verses 1 through 3, it's all about how great Allah is, right? Then verses 4 through 10, it discusses what the disbelievers, people who just didn't rock with what Muhammad was talking about, what they've done. Then verses 14 through 73 discusses Allah's response to the prophet on what he should say to the disbelievers, right? So all of this is just propaganda for Islam, right? Now we get to some stories though. Verses 74 through 83, it's discussing the story of Abraham. And then 84 through 86, it's other prophets. 86 through 117, it talks about how great the book is, how great Islam is, how great the Quran is, so on and so forth. And then the rest of the verses, they're kind of specific to Islam. Now, that type of structure becomes important because it repeats itself throughout nearly every surah in the Quran, right? Whenever you read the surahs in the Quran, the chapters in the Quran, you begin to see that pattern. This is the revelation, it's so great, and then it closes with how great it is, right? And then that's that pattern in the middle, right? And this is known, and this is interesting because the Bible being the Quran, with it being sung and everything, like I know that it has some sort of like indoctrinating force, because the power of the song, the rhyme, the verse, the prose upon the consciousness of the human, and it to be sung every day, all day, 5 times a day, like it's definitely a propaganda indoctrination pattern and tool. All right, but now the surahs that I'm going to analyze in this series are only the ones, however, that concern the stories of the Quran and how it relates to the stories of the Bible. I'm not gonna look at all the other different verses, like the mountain says pegs and all this other stuff, and how the Quran it talks about sperm fertilizing the egg. I'm not gonna deal with that. I'm gonna deal with the stories of the Bible that are similar to the stories of the Quran that are similar to the stories of the Bible, and a specific kind of charismatic tactic that was being used in order to gain and win converts, right? Because the stories that we find in the Bible, like the story about Abraham, is different than what we find in the accepted biblical canon, right? The canon of books that came down through the West to the modern day society, right? And so these stories in the Quran, like it has the air of mysticism and mystery to it, like you learn something deeper about somebody that's not in a book, and so it's like it draws you towards thinking that there's more truth here, when really we see a plagiarism going on. So what we see is that it's assumed that the revelations given to Muhammad were unique and deeper revelations than what's found in the Bible. However, what we see are different stories, not revelations, right? These are plagiarized stories from books that were not included in the Bible, but were a part of other Christianities that were condemned by the Catholic Church. This is why I said earlier, it's important to look at the early schisms that would occur inside the Catholic Church. Now, let's look at the first plagiarized story that I found. It's in verse 74. Is when we are introduced to Abraham, defying his family's tradition and questioning the rationale of worshiping other gods besides Allah. So I'll look again to see if the Abraham story occurs earlier, in like surahs 1-5. However, this surah and verse tells us something different about Abraham, something different than what is in the Bible, right? So in the Bible, we are introduced to Abraham in Genesis 11, verse 27. And this chapter tells us that Abraham is from the line of Shem, right? After the Tower of Babel, which is the story following the Table of Nations, right? Which is an account of the peoples that populated the earth after the flood. Just an interesting kind of side note, the lineage from Shem to Abraham, like the amount of years is only 292. And then according to the Bible, Noah was alive during this whole time. Like actually, Noah was alive at the birth of Abraham, because it says that Noah lived 350 years after the flood, and Abraham was born 292 years after the flood. If we look at all the ages of the people, according to the Bible, that was born before Abraham. I find that strange. Like, it's only after the flood, only 292 years passed before the birth of Abraham, and yet Egypt was a great civilization. It's just like the timeline makes no sense. So anyway, now in the biblical story, we're told that God speaks to Abraham and tells him to leave his family in their ways, right? This is at the age of 75. After his father Terah moved his family from Ur of the Chaldeans to Haran. Abraham was told to move from Haran and go to Canaan. God then, or El Shaddai, promises the land to Abraham and his descendants. We're all very familiar with that part of the story, right? However, in this story, we are not told of any of the interactions between Abraham and his family, right? We're not told of any qualities or actions that Abraham may have had or done to make him special. It's just as if though he was randomly chosen. Like, it's just like God chose him randomly. Well, from the book which this story is taken, the Chronicles of Jeremiah. When I talked to you earlier about the Philo, the pseudo-Philo books, chapter 34, it's a collection of stories that discusses this. Now let's compare, right? Let me hold up. Let me split my camera so all right. In the Quran, it says, when the night grew dark upon him, he saw a star and said, "This is my Lord." But when it set, he said, "I do not love things that set." This is a translation by Dr. Mustafa Khattab. Then, when he saw the moon rising, he said, "This is my Lord." But when it disappeared, he said, "If my Lord does not guide me, I will certainly be one of the misguided people." Then, when he saw the sun shining, he said, "This must be my Lord. It is the greatest." But again, when it set, he declared, "O my people, I totally reject whatever you associate with Allah in worship." In the Chronicles of Jeremiah, misspelled, but chapter 34, it says, when Terah heard the words, he immediately went home and hid his son Abraham in a cave for 3 years. After that time, he brought him forth. As soon as Abraham saw the rising sun in the east, he said to himself, "Of a certainty, this is the Lord of the whole world, and to him I pray. He created me and the whole world." When he saw the moon, he said, "This is the Lord of the whole world, and to him I shall supplicate. He created me and the whole world." Thus, when evening came and the sun had set and the moon had risen, he prayed to the moon the whole night. When, however, the morning came, the moon had set and the sun rose. As soon as he saw the sun on the morrow, Abraham said, now do I know that neither the one nor the other is the Lord of the world, but that both of them are servants of another master, and that is the Lord who created the heavens and the earth and the whole world. So, looking at that, we can clearly see concepts of plagiarism going on here, right? So first in the Quran, Abraham saw the moon and said he will worship it. Then the moon went away and the sun rose. Then when the sun set, Abraham rejected those notions, right? In the Chronicles of Jeremiah, Abraham saw the sun and he said he'll worship it. Next he saw the moon and rose. And when the moon set, Abraham gave up on his father's religion. So this is clear plagiarism, not a revelation from the divine, because we all know that men write books. No. Somebody from the Christian church helped to give this story to whoever wrote it in Islam, and then they claim it's a divine revelation from God that's not in the Bible. Join me next time as we explore other stories from other pseudepigrapher works that are in the Quran, and then we're looking at the clear plagiarism that the Quran had. Peace.